Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. If you would, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Here.
Mrs. Koski?
Present.
Mr. Radke?
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Yanez?
Here.
Mrs. Yarko?
Present.
Thank you, Council. We need approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
I was hoping to take item K off of the consent agenda and make it, I guess it would be,
We'll take K and we'll make it, we'll take 8K and we'll make it item 9 and we'll bump everything down.
okay.
So 9 will be consideration items and 10 will be communications from citizens, et cetera. Any objection? Council, any other action on the agenda? No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Let me begin this evening by giving an update on our property valuations across the city. Every year I report on this, and it's always good news, and I think it's important for the community to see where we rank statewide and throughout Macomb County. When purchasing property, whether it's a home or business, individuals want to see a return on investment. Strong property values is a primary measure used to determine return on investment. Strong code enforcement, community-oriented policing, investing in parks and other quality of life amenities are all factors that tend to increase residential property values. The same factors, along with proactive economic development programs, help businesses thrive, create jobs, resulting in strong commercial and industrial property values. So if I could, I'd like to draw your attention to the screen, and I'll walk you through the rankings. So these are the top 5 cities in the state ranked by property valuation. And on the far left side is the city of Detroit. Based on its sheer size and magnitude of that city, it ranks number 1 in a lot of property valuation categories. The categories include residential, commercial, industrial, personal, and then total valuation. So those are the categories on the left-hand side. And statewide, the most important categories we really look at is industrial and residential. And you can see to be in the top 5 is, I think, quite impressive in and of itself. On residential values in statewide, we rank just slightly behind Troy with our overall residential property valuation. But interestingly, throughout the state, we rank second on industrial valuations. Again, that's second across the state, only behind the city of Detroit. And as I mentioned earlier, due to their sheer square footage and very large geography, they do have a significant amount of industrial property there. So it's always good to be in the top 5 in any category, but to be in the top 4 for residential and top 2 for industrial is really good. And the reason why industrial is so important to the city is industrial obviously creates jobs, and it has the largest economic impact to the local economy and to the regional economy. So far greater than commercial economic impact, residential impact, and so on. So industrial is very important, and also illustrates that Sterling Heights is not a bedroom community. We have 60,000 people that work here in good-paying jobs. We have one of the largest number of engineers per capita of any city our size in the country, and that's all because of our really strong industrial base. Now, when we drill down a little further, let's take a look at Macomb County. And you can see Sterling Heights over on the left-hand side, same categories. Although there's agriculture in this category, none of the communities, with the exception of Macomb Township, have any agricultural property valuation. But on residential valuation county-wide, Sterling Heights ranks number 1. And the second highest in residential would be Macomb Township. So again, this is an impressive ranking to have in the county. Commercial, we're 1. Industrial, we're 2, just slightly behind the city of Warren. City of Warren has obviously the tech center and also an impressive an amount of industrial property. But you can see we rank 1 and 2 in all these categories. So the bottom line is this: strong overall property values, especially residential, make communities more desirable, thus creating increases in population and perpetual synergy. And so that's what we want to continue in Sterling Heights. That's what we're focused on every year, day in and day out. And we're going to continue to do all that we can to make sure that we rank very high in all these classes. So let me move on to our Innovate Mound project. As many of you know, and we do have an agenda item regarding somewhat related to this evening that's been moved a little further on our agenda. But I think it's good that the community know exactly where this project is at. It is starting up this summer. It's a massive project, over $200 million. The city played a major role a couple years ago in securing the federal funding that was required to make this project possible. The project limits are from 696 up to M59. The project will start at M59 in Sterling Heights and continue the next couple of years for 6 miles in Sterling Heights. So it's really state of the art. I won't go into all the details, but I did want to introduce John Bailey, who's the ombudsman for the project, and also Steve Griffith. I think Steve's going to start out as project manager with HNTB and just give us an update on where we're at with the project and what we have to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you for inviting us here to discuss the project. We're very excited to get going with the Innovate Mound project. It's been a long process to date so far to get everything through the preliminary design and procurement phase. And moved on to this next phase of the project where we're going to be shortly starting construction and over the next 3 years reconstructing the Mound Road corridor, really transforming it into a more innovative corridor for the future, really future-proofing the corridor. So on May 14th, the bids were turned in by the 2 shortlisted design build firms, and Dan's Excavating, a local contractor, was awarded the contract at approximately $217 million. So with that, this is a large design build project. So we completed preliminary plans up to about a 30% level of engineering throughout the corridor, and then developed design build procurement documents, which include all the contract requirements, for the design builder to complete the design of the rest of the corridor and then go reconstruct it. So with that, the design builder submitted what's called a alternate technical concept, which allows them to propose different ways to construct the project or different concepts that if they result in cost savings or time savings to the project, they become incorporated into the contract. One of those was revising the project schedule. I know during a lot of our public engagement meetings, we were out in front of communities, in front of the residents, in front of the stakeholders, really telling them that we'd be starting the reconstruction of Mound Road this year from 18 Mile up to M59. But with one of the technical proposals or alternate technical concepts that was submitted by the design builder, we're really reconstructing the project over a 2-year phase as opposed to 3 full years of reconstruction. So this year, later this year in August, we will be starting work from about 15.5 mile, which we know there is no 15.5 mile road. But just for simplicity purposes, we're kind of phrasing the Sterling Relief Drain, referring to that as kind of that 15.5 mile point. So we'll be doing some temporary work for median widenings to prepare for maintaining traffic and traffic switches in early 2022. So starting in August, we'll take single and double lane closures on Mountain Road to widen Mountain Road out in the median area from approximately the Sterling Relief Drain north to M59. We'll also be constructing some of the temporary drainage and permanent drainage along the corridor as well. And we'll begin some of the municipal utility work. As part of this project, we've included, there is municipal utility repairs to both Sterling Heights sanitary sewer and water main throughout the corridor, as well as repairs to City of Warren sanitary and water main. So both cities are taking advantage of the construction work ongoing to kind of look long-term and make some improvements to their utility features as a result, and take advantage of some cost sharing as a result of that, really being able to take advantage of mobilization and economy of scale, having that work all incorporated into this project. So with that, we're looking at lane closure starting in mid-August, and we'll be working through mid-December this year, preparing for the full reconstruction to start in early 2022. Right now, we're looking at March 1, 2022, really getting out there and starting the reconstruction. And that work will run through I'd say mid-November of 2022 as well. And then we'll be kind of shutting down, doing some temporary, and open everything back up through the winter. Then come again in this start of 2023. In March 2023, we'll be reconstructing the south piece of the project from about that Sterling Relief Drain south to 11 Mile Road. With that, we are currently working through preliminary design plans now. We've received some maintaining traffic submittals as well as some bridge plans and some other design build submittals. So we're working through those, evaluating those, and verifying that they meet all the contract requirements. And as we get closer to those construction kickoff dates, we'll be having a construction, like a groundbreaking meeting in late July, early August. In addition to that, we'll have a emergency responder meeting as well, where we'll have a meeting with the contractor, our project management team, as well as Sterling Heights City and Police, and Warren City and Police, and Macomb County Sheriff's Department, to make sure we're coordinating, making sure that all emergency responders know access points throughout the corridor, and that we're maintaining access for them. Another key component of the project that we're excited to talk about is the project ombudsman. So that is going to be a dedicated person who's going to be available 24/7. They will be an actual construction field person. They won't be somebody sitting in an office or a communications person. They'll be out on the job day in, day out. They will have a dedicated phone that's available 24/7, and that information will be shared on the project website, well, on project flyers and information sheets. So that way, any residents, any business owners, or any motorists through the corridor, if they have any questions, concerns with any of the work on the project, they can call that phone number, which will be 1-800-MOUND-4U, with the number 4 and then the letter U. So that phone number will be available. That will be the hotline for the ombudsman. They'll be able to respond to any immediate issues on the project, whether that be maintaining access to businesses or communicating with the schools. We have both Utica schools and Warren Consolidated Schools. Their main bus depots are located within the project limits, so close communications with schools will be necessary during construction as well. So really, that person is going to be out there dedicated, taking a proactive approach to really getting out, meeting with the people on the streets, making sure that they're aware when there's going to be impacts to their business access, whether it's partial closure of their driveway, or talking to the community as well to make sure that they're aware of when we're going to have a partial closure of their roadway, just to reconstruct that access along Mountain Road. So with that, I will go ahead and open it up if there's any questions.
So normally we would ask questions during the agenda item here. Are you guys going to be sticking around until the end of the meeting?
Yeah, we can stay.
Okay. I'd appreciate that, because what I think we'll do is we're going to consider the contract in a little bit, and I'm sure the council will have some questions. So if you guys can stay, we've got a couple other things, but I think we should breeze through this pretty quickly, so it shouldn't be too late.
All right.
Fair enough?
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Mayor, I just have one last item on my report, and that is at the conclusion of tonight's agenda, I'm requesting that the City Council convene a closed session pursuant to Section 8C and H of the Open Meetings Act for council to consult with the city attorney regarding ongoing collective bargaining negotiations and to discuss 2 confidential written legal opinions. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. Next item on our agenda tonight is an ordinance introduction, and this is to consider introduction of an ordinance amending chapters 111 and 33 of the city code to define offensive odors as a public nuisance and property maintenance violation and provide for municipal civil infraction penalties for violations. We have a presentation from our Assistant City Attorney, Don Denault. Mr. Denault.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Happy to be here with you this evening. I just made it in before the storms, I think, so hopefully those will pass before we all leave. Tonight before you, administration has proposed that we present to you an ordinance amendment that is very brief in scope and nature. And what it's really designed to do is ensure that our code enforcement officials and officers have the ability, while they're in the city, to deal with resident complaints and other observations of what we're calling offensive odors or objectionable odors. Right now, our tools are limited. We only have the nuisance ordinance to rely upon, and that's a misdemeanor offense for anybody and everybody who might be creating odors, causing a disturbance of the peace, or causing others in the community to have their comfort unreasonably interfered with. So we thought, in order to help code enforcement, help the city and help residents with complaints, and also to help our police and fire officials not have to be the only ones responsible for this type of enforcement, this ordinance amendment would allow this type of violation, this very specific odor violation, to be a municipal civil infraction. And for those in the audience, a municipal civil infraction is a bit like a traffic ticket in a sense. It's a civil violation, not a criminal violation, so you don't have to incur a criminal record for it. And it carries with it a fine, a punishment, if you will, solely existing or consisting of a fine for the infraction. The proposed ordinance is based loosely on some of the things we found in other communities throughout the country. The most interesting one that I chose not to use, just to give you some context as to what's out there, in 2019, there was a community in another state that made it illegal to create an offensive smell as may taint the air and render it unwholesome or disagreeable to another person. That's a bit extreme, we thought, and a bit vague as well. We wanted to try to be much more objective with our drafting, so we did look at other examples, and ultimately we came up with our own, I think, unique and very tailored example, which basically has 2 components to it. In essence, if you commit an odor or a smell or something that leaves your property line and affects other people because you're doing something illegal. So let's say, for example, you bring a horse to live with you in a very tight residential subdivision, right? We're not zoned for that. That horse could create odors. So in addition to the illegalness of the fact that you brought the horse to live at your house, it may create odors that would lead to an objectionable smell by the residents and neighbors in that area. So that would be ticketable as a civil infraction, in addition to any other illegalities that may be occurring by virtue of the behavior. The second possible way by which someone could violate the ordinance is if you create such a smell that's just so intense, or it's just so long in duration, or so recurring and not ending, as to unreasonably interfere with the comfort, repose, health, or peace of the public or a neighboring property. And if that's the type of complaint we're going to get, we built in a sort of a redundancy. Make sure that a city employee or someone acting on behalf of the city can actually verify that it exists off the property line and can identify where it's coming from. So that, we thought, would help us protect against unreasonable complaints or complaints that can never be verified, and give us sort of a two-component way of validating these types of complaints. I think the ultimate goal for code enforcement is to, and you know, I'm coming up on 25 years of being with the city, and I don't think we have a major problem with these. I think diplomacy works. I think talking to people works and really helps resolve these. And I think that will continue to happen. But what this does is it just gives code enforcement that extra tool for those that really don't want to come into compliance, or who don't believe that they're really hurting their neighbors. And so this, I think, will be a good tool in the toolbox to use going forward. With that, I am here and certainly able to entertain any questions anyone may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Denault. Anyone in the audience like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Sarowski.
resolved to introduce the ordinance amending chapters 1, 11, and 33 of the city code to define offensive odors as a public nuisance and property maintenance violation, and to provide for municipal civil infraction penalties for violations.
Support. Been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Sarowski?
Actually, I just have a couple of questions for Mr. Denault, if I could, through the chair, please. Thank you, Mr. Denault. So I see that we will have fines for this as well as a cost. So it's a maximum, so it escalates. So the first is going to be 500, and then it escalates to a maximum of 1,500. How fast do we get there? Is it 500, 1,000, 15? Is it, how do we do this?
Absolutely, great question, Ms. Strosky. It starts at $500 for the first violation. So obviously at that point, we're asking that residents take it seriously and discontinue the problem. Obviously, if the problem persists, as with any nuisance under nuisance law, each additional day is a new violation if it continues into the next day and the next day and the next day. So in theory, the next repeat offense would be a $750 offense, the next would be $1,000, and everything after that would be $1,500 per offense. It doesn't mean, obviously, that everybody's going to be held to that, assuming they finally correct the problem, they work with the city, they work with their neighbors, but those are the fines scheduled in the ordinance.
Okay, and so to be clear, then it's not, you hit 1,500 and you're done, you never get another infraction. You
Correct.
have each
Correct. You don't just get
additional
to pay a
offense would
fee and
continue.
get out of jail free, right?
Okay, very good. That was actually all I had. So thank you very much, Mr. Denault. No further questions.
Mr. Radke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Denault, just to be clear, are these fines per offense? Are they per day? I just want to make sure I know what you're saying here. Sorry.
Absolutely, no, good question. Just to be very, very clear, they are per violation. So how do we define a violation? Violation would mean you committed a verifiable offense, one way or the other, either by doing something illegal that created the odor or by creating such an odor that it's offensive to others and disturbing their peace and is verified by the city. In either case, it's one time per day. So it's not like the city is going to come to your house and say, you know, your horse is causing all this odor, we're going to ticket you every 15 minutes. It's let's talk to you about removing the horse, trying to solve the problem, give you a reasonable amount of time. Code enforcement tends to work on a schedule where they give you a few days to work things out. But ultimately, should the odor be so offensive or so difficult to manage, it would be the first day and then the next day and then the next day, every 24-hour period. It would not be continuous or you get another offense every 15 minutes because you still haven't solved it.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. This is one more tool in the toolbox for Sterling Heights. I know I asked city administration to come to the table and bring us an ordinance that says we can hopefully use it against some of the frequent flyers who really violate our ordinances, like these marijuana grow houses that just over the weekend darkened an entire neighborhood by blowing out a panel box and starting a fire that burnt down the pole. So it's just one more way that we can hopefully prevent these things from affecting the quality of life of our residents. So I'm totally and utterly in favor of this. I hope we don't have to use it, but I know we're going to have to because, like I said, there's several people who are contributing to this problem greatly, and I think this will be one more way to say, go do your violation someplace else. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else?
Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Denault. Mr. Denault, just for the public's information, we have it in our backup. Could you go over the exceptions to this ordinance?
Of course, I'm happy to. So for anyone watching or listening, we did build in some exceptions. Obviously, the very most important exception, which isn't a highlighted exception, is if it doesn't rise to the level of, you know, truly disturbing somebody's peace, truly being an unreasonable interference with somebody's house or home life or occupation, it's never going to get to the level of needing to be ticketed. Maybe a discussion perhaps that there's been a complaint, but that's as far as it would go. Ultimately, though, we have built in very black and white exceptions that we thought were good examples that other people had thought of and some of the things we thought of as well. For example, anytime you're doing open burning or recreational fire in your backyard, those things are governed by our fire code. And so you should have the proper permitting or you should be doing it in accordance with the fire code in a way that isn't causing offensive odors. But even if there is a smell of something burning crossing property lines, that's completely reasonable in our society and would be allowed so long as the fire code was being complied with. The other examples of exceptions, any type of odor that's created during construction of something, you know, like a principal use, you're redeveloping a property or you're building on it for the first time, or by incidental traffic or parking or loading or maintenance operations on a site. Those kinds of things being incidental are going to happen from time to time, whether it's fumes from a vehicle or vehicle fleet. Those kinds of things obviously are not considered unreasonable, so we've identified those as exceptions. We also have an exception for odors that are created by public services. Obviously, if there's anything we're doing as a city, such as street cleaning, for example, that wouldn't be deemed an unreasonable odor under the ordinance. And finally, we built in any agricultural use types of odors. We don't have much agricultural use in the city, but should anybody choose to use their zoned property for agricultural use, that kind of smell would be acceptable in that type of environment. So that would be an exception as well.
Okay, thanks. And where do restaurants fall into this? I mean, sometimes, occasionally, we'll get a complaint about odors coming from restaurants, grilling or such.
Yes, great question. I haven't, again, almost 25 years, I can't think of a time when it's just been odor. We do get occasional complaints about restaurant smells, but typically there's more to it. Typically there's smoke, there's fumes, there's something else going on. A lot of times it has to do with grease filtering within the environment itself, or the way they're expelling the grease exhaust and the smoke and fumes out of the restaurant. This could be used for that, but I think we have enough tools in the tool belt under the fire code and the building codes, and certainly the occupational codes to regulate those types of things and make sure we get them into compliance. And again, we have the nuisance ordinance as well. So I don't know that this would be used too often. It would really truly depend on how much peace they were disturbing, because they're not doing anything illegal, so it wouldn't fall under that prong. It would really come down to, are they doing something so offensive that the neighborhood's peace and tranquility is being disturbed?
Great, thank you so much. Nothing further.
Mr. Yanes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Mr. Denault. Who's going to make the determination that this is offensive?
Yes, sir. Great question. So ultimately, it comes down to reasonableness, and that's just a legal standard that we apply without really being able to define that in black and white. What is reasonable and what isn't can be different for everybody. So the courts, if this went to a hearing, would determine it under a reasonable person standard. The court is going to look at it as, is this something a reasonable person would truly be disturbed by? That's the standard when it gets to that point. If we're just getting to the point of issuing a citation, it seems to me that the standard will be that code enforcement, police, fire, whoever's involved, we'll be looking at it from the standpoint of how many complaints are we receiving? Is it one complaint, and does this person have some other agenda or reason to be complaining? Have we verified this smell? Is it offensive to us as well? The standard isn't whether or not it offends a city employee, but they can be the extra check, and they will be the extra check to verify that the people complaining are truly being disturbed by it.
And how are we going to make sure that we have consistency? We have multiple fire stations, fire officers that will be responding, multiple police officers, code enforcement officers. One may find it offensive, one may not. How are we going to make sure that there's a standard?
Absolutely. So for everyone doing enforcement, whether it's fire, police, or code, they will all be under the same broad umbrella of advise or verify the complaint, first of all. So take the complaint, address the complaint, verify the complaint, and then after you have done the homework, you've talked to the complainant, you've talked to others in the area if there are others in the area affected, you've talked to the offender to try to resolve it. If all of that fails, and if all of that process leads them to the conclusion, then they're going to bring it to their superiors, make sure it's approved, and they're going to move forward with it in that respect. So there will always be that check and balance of, do we have complainants? Can we verify what the complainants are saying? Is there no ulterior motive here going on? And do we believe it to meet the level that should go to court? And you're right, humanity gets in the way sometimes, and we're going to have a little bit of flexibility, but that's the point of this too, is to have a little bit of flexibility in deciding whether or not it's offensive. Either way, if they choose not to issue a citation because it doesn't rise to the level in the city's mind that it's offensive, there's still the fact that they've talked to the resident or the business, they've tried to work through the problem, they've talked to the complainants about what they need to make it verifiable, to make it rise to the right level. And if they, on the other hand, feel that it does rise to that level, they will issue the citation, and ultimately we'll work through it in the court process.
And one last question. So this was brought up by Councilman Radke. So would this apply to somebody who's legally growing marijuana and their neighbors don't like the smell?
It can, yes. That's a great question. So obviously, if they're illegally doing it, that's prong one of the whole ordinance, and we're done, right? You can't be doing something illegal that offends people with the smell and odor leaving the property line. But if they are legally growing marijuana, they're legally growing 12 or less plants within a residence because under the Recreational Marijuana Act they're allowed to. That odor they still have an obligation to maintain that odor to their property. They have no right to trespass upon other property and other people's rights. So I always describe it as, and people sometimes mix this up, but I always try to explain it like this. You may have a right to do something. You have a right to use fireworks. You have a right to own a gun. You have a lot of different statutory and constitutional rights in society, but at the same time, there comes a point when your rights can't trespass on the rights of others to be free of the incursions that those might bring. So I may have the right to light certain fireworks, but I don't have the right to litter on your roof. Same thing here. We have ordinances in place that are designed to protect people from offensive odors or offensive conditions that result from lawful activities. So to your question directly, yes, a lawful marijuana grow, whatever it may be, whether it's a caregiver or whether it's a recreational person, in either case, if those odors become pervasive in the neighborhood, they have exceeded what we deem to be a proper residential use, and if they are offending the neighborhood and causing a disturbance of the peace, then that's where this ordinance comes into play.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mrs. Zarko?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. First of all, thank you for the very informative presentation. Most of my questions have been answered, but the one, we've been looking at restaurants and as far as offensive odors and what the difference is between aromatic and offensive to different people. But we've had complaints about, in the industrial area of, say, their plastic injection molding companies, where it might be on the east side of Mound Road, but we're getting the complaints from the west side of Mound Road. First of all, would this ordinance apply to those areas? And I guess would we notify, say, this particular business and say that we weren't able to do anything in the past, but now we have this ordinance, and to forewarn them that it might happen again? Through the chair to Mr. Denal.
Mr. Donald?
That's a great question. One of the examples I was thinking of before I came up was similar to that, so I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to incorporate into this an example of perhaps a paint shop, something where they're dealing with a lot of fumes, and at times the fumes are going to drift into the air and perhaps into a neighboring residential area or someplace nearby. They may even drift over into another commercial or industrial area and really hamper their businesses. We had a situation not long ago of some kind of smoking going on in one tenant space that was infiltrating walls and getting into the neighboring tenant space. I think it was a Dairy Queen. And it was very difficult for Dairy Queen to operate under those conditions. So to your example, absolutely this would apply. Code enforcement's general modus operandi is to talk with the business first, make sure they understand what's going on, the nature of the complaint, that it's been verified by city people, and not, so to speak, pull the trigger on just issuing tickets and moving on to the next business. They've always been about it, what they call an NOV, a notice of violation. I suspect that practice will continue, where they let you know, we have a problem, let's solve it before we have to get to the ticket writing stage. And it would absolutely apply to that kind of even lawful industrial type of business. If it's not able to control how it's affecting other properties, then it's time for them to come up with new methods to do that.
Okay. I guess that would be, I guess would there be different regulations for, places we've already had complaints about, and something that's going to come up, in the future? I guess because we didn't have any of the tools you're talking about to do any kind of enforcement, how does that happen now? I mean, when we've had complaints in certain areas, do we just start from scratch and now this is the new ordinance? And then how do we get the word out that we have this ordinance so that people know? It's like the snow removal or anything else, is how do we get the message out so people know that we have an ordinance now and you could be fined for offensive odors?
Absolutely, Ms. Yarko. I will defer to community relations on how best to inform the public. I suspect all of the usual channels will be exercised and get the word out. To your question about we've had the offenders, up till now and how have we dealt with them, a number of different ways, depending on the level of severity. We have seen nuisance violations issued. It's rare. They are misdemeanor violations, so again, we don't like to use that until it's a last resort. We've done some nuisance abatement in litigation type situations where there's usually more going on than just an offensive odor, but we've had to go to circuit court for those. Beyond that, I think it's been diplomacy up to this point, and I think that's part of the frustration is code enforcement doesn't have much to work with because they can't issue misdemeanor violations in their role. They're not police officers. So yes, they could take them to the Board of Ordinance Appeals and declare it a nuisance and tell them to abate it. That's a public process, and it's a good process for things that can be fixed and taken care of, that should be taken care of routinely. But sometimes that's a little trickier when you're dealing with this kind of situation where you have neighbor complaints and an odor problem that can be solved through other types of means, technological or otherwise, air filtration systems, things like that. So that's how we've dealt with it up until now. More diplomacy, I'd say, and then extreme measures. This is sort of that middle level measure where, we're not able to quite get through to you diplomatically. Maybe $500, on the table and having to go to a court proceeding, that might help get you to where you need to be so that we can solve this problem for everybody around you.
And lastly, in the fee structure schedule would be whether it's residential, industrial, commercial. It doesn't matter where it's at. The fee structure will be the same. Doesn't matter how big or how small.
That's
Is that
correct. We don't discriminate amongst property sizes or operations or values. It's all about just being kind to your neighbors.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarko. Ms. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Mr. Denault, I'm assuming that the agricultural exception here would apply to someone that's doing a compost pile in their backyard?
Yes, Ms. Koski, it would, absolutely. I don't think anybody doing residential gardening, composting, any of those things, this is not what this is for. This is designed to go after folks who are doing things either illegal, which that would not be, or folks who are not tending to things that need to be tended to. But regular composting, regular gardening, the application of manure and landscaping and mulch, those kinds of things would not be impacted by this ordinance.
Would it also exempt someone that likes to smoke meat outside in their backyard and the odor kind of drifts to somebody next door?
That's a great question. If the smoking itself were legal, then no, it would not. It's no different than barbecuing in your backyard. It's a traditional residential use. No one is going to deem that to be an unreasonable odor. And certainly it doesn't have a duration to it or a proliferation to it that's going to offend the entire neighborhood. So those kinds of activities, as long as they're legal, because I've seen some that aren't, where they build a shed and they start using it as a smoker without any permits and those kinds of things. But assuming they have all their permits and everything's safe, no, this would not apply to those.
Okay, so only if it's illegal. How would you handle a vacant property that all of a sudden comes up with an odor?
Well, the ticket would be issued, if it had to be, to the vacant property's owner, wherever they may be. They could be out of state, they could be local. They may have a property management agent that we can talk to. I'm not sure are you imagining a situation where somebody maybe left some dumping or left something on the property that caused the odor? Otherwise, a vacant property, to me, would just be weeds and grass and lawn, and hopefully isn't creating any odors from those types of, those conditions.
Basically, if someone, let's say, is deceased and the house is vacant, no one attends to it, and then all of a sudden it is producing odors. It could be mildew, it could be something growing in the basement, could be just about anything. How do you handle something like that?
Sure. Really, this ordinance wouldn't change how we handle that now. Although we don't see it too often, it has come up over the years. The first approach would be to figure out who's in charge of the estate. So, for example, if we don't have a corporate owner, we don't have an individual heir, we just have maybe an estate, or maybe we have what they call intestate, where we have somebody who did not have a will or a trust to figure out where this property is supposed to go. We're either going to help them get an estate going, either through the court system or otherwise, or we're going to find the estate and let them know that they are responsible as an estate for managing that property. We have a couple of those. We've had a couple of those over the past year or two, very similar situations to your question. But in both cases, thankfully, we have an estate. We have somebody in charge of administering that estate. In one case, I believe we have a lawyer administering that estate. And it's that person's responsibility to make sure there's a lawn care company, there's somebody taking care of the house and the property, keeping it clean, keeping it free of mildew, mold, animals running through, creating animal smells. That's their responsibility. So this ordinance won't change that. What it would give us is the ability, if we needed it, to issue a citation to those people that are responsible.
To make contact with the owner, the person responsible, and get it settled, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Koski. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't really like it, if I'm being honest. Section 1 seems okay. It's fine, because you've got the caveat that you have to be doing something illegal. I mean, from my perspective, there's only one issue here. There's only one concern I have, and it's these illegal grow operations that cause a major problem throughout the neighborhood. Now, maybe some of those operations are legal technically under the state's guidelines, but it's those big sort of industrial grow operations that neighbors can smell throughout the city. And I don't mind enacting something to give us another tool to use against those violators. But we've been pretty good, Mr. Koszubski and you, Mr. Denault, at getting those shut down. And so I'm not sure that this is going to help other than just add another 500, 750, whatever, onto the fine. What concerns me is section 2. So section 2, in section 1, you say it has to be an illegal activity. If you're doing something legal on your property that creates an odor, then that's not what we're regulating. But then in section 2, it doesn't have that illegality component. So I guess I'm not entirely clear, why do we need section 1 and section 2?
Sure, I'm happy to help with that. Section 2, just to clarify, because I know this is very technical and you don't have the entire code book in front of you to give it some context. Section 2 is just a small amendment into the property maintenance code. It's a very specific code in the city, and its purpose there is just to make sure that it cross-references back to the new ordinance that we're preparing. The real purpose of that, well, there's two purposes. One, to make sure it cross-references, everything ties together. The second, in my mind, was the property maintenance code is the book, it's sort of the guide that our code enforcement officers use. So that's very important to them to have that built right into their property maintenance code, because that's where a lot of their authority derives. So to have us amend the property maintenance code itself, which is a very technical code, it's an international code, it combines with building codes and fire codes, and they all kind of work together in unison. To have it in the property maintenance code and then tie it back, as you can see by the second sentence, tying it back to the definition in the actual nuisance ordinance, to us made perfect sense to make sure they have the same tools and that they're not relying on what's traditionally been known as a misdemeanor ordinance, a regulatory ordinance, if you will, not a code. It's a little bit more foreign to code enforcement. It's much cleaner to have it in the property maintenance code for them.
I certainly get that, but then with section 2, you add it into the property maintenance code, and then in section 4, you make it a municipal civil infraction to violate that section of the property maintenance code, and the offense is the same as the offense in section 5, which my understanding is relates back, and section 3 and section 5 relate back to section 1.
Yes.
And section 4 relates back to section 2. So
Yes.
if you have a noxious odor emanating from a property and you're doing something illegal, you could be fined for $500. But if you have a noxious odor emanating from your property and you're doing something perfectly legal, you're also fined $500. So section 1 and section 3 seem superfluous to me. Whereas I would probably support this. I'm going to vote yes on it today, but this is just the introduction. I'll talk to administration, I'll talk to legal, but it seems to me if we're making, like, I read the code. There's a code that already says a nuisance is anything. It's a big code, right? And that's, which one is 33?
It should be 33-2 is a
Yeah.
definitional section, yes.
But it says, a nuisance is really anything, public nuisance is any act, omission, condition which injuriously affects the health, safety, or morals of the public or causes some substantial annoyance, inconvenience, or injury to the public, including but not limited to the following. So, I would say that the heavy marijuana smell is already something that causes substantial annoyance. I know it does, and if you don't think it does, you're free to read my emails. There are a lot of people that don't like it. So it seems to me that already fits. Now, I don't mind adding something onto that, but I have real concerns about, like, what if a skunk comes and sprays on my property? Now there is a clearly offensive odor emanating from my property, and it's my responsibility to get rid of it. What do I do? They sprayed the tree. It's just going to take some time to go away. Is the city going to come and write me a $500 ticket unless I cut the tree down? Probably not, right? But you have the ability to. So I don't know. I don't mind the illegality portion of it. I don't like the rest of it. And it seems like it could be already handled under what we've got. So I'll vote yes. I'm going to give it more consideration, and I'd like to know if you could call my concerns by the next meeting, okay? All right. Council, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an ordinance adoption, and this is to adopt the final amendment to the appropriations ordinance for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolve to adopt the final amendment to the appropriations ordinance for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, council?
I
Mrs. Zarko?
think this has been, thank you, Mayor Taylor, but I think this has been discussed. I think it's been explained, so unless Mrs. Varney would like to approach and add something, I have no questions.
Council, anyone else? With no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Next is the consent agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on any item on the consent agenda with the omission of item K? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Support.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next up is item K from the consent agenda. This was made consideration item 9A. And this is to approve a cost-sharing agreement between the Macomb County Department of Roads, City of Sterling Heights, and City of Warren for the reconstruction of Mound Road, Innovate Mound, from I-696 to M59. The estimated city share of road project, $41,075,673. Estimated city share of water and sewer improvements, $11,347,267. Mr. Vanderpool, do you want to make any sort of a presentation, or should I just go to the audience?
Mayor, I think it was covered quite well earlier, but I will just add, I think the reason Councilmember Radke pulled this was because of sidewalk, and I'll just make a preliminary comment on sidewalk. As everyone knows, it's been our crusade over the last 20 years to close as many gaps of sidewalk in our city as possible. And I think we've made significant progress over the past few years, well over the last, that same period of time, but even more so in, say, the last 5 years or so. We've closed major gaps along Van Dyke. We've closed gaps, and we're in the process right now of closing a big one between 18 Mile and 18 and a half on Van Dyke. 18 Mile from Van Dyke to Mound, and the list just goes on and on and on. I think we're all very proud of that. On Mound Road, we also have some significant sidewalk gaps right now. This project will close the gaps on Mound on the west side. There will be a 10-foot sidewalk from M59 all the way down the length of the entire project. So 100% of the gaps on the west side will be closed. However, on the east side, that will not be the case. We will not have a 10-foot pathway. It just was not possible to get it into the scope of the project, although initially it was in all the concept renderings that were submitted to the federal government for the federal funding. But there have been numerous reductions in value engineering that had to occur along the way. So we're very pleased to close gaps on the west side. Unfortunately, the gaps on the east side looks like that's going to have to be a later phase. There will be new sidewalk on the east side in certain areas, but not the entire length. But as was indicated earlier, aside from that reduced scope, this project will be one of the most state-of-the-art roadways in certainly the state of Michigan and quite possibly the country. There's a lot of technical amenities, vehicle connectivity amenities, and various icing amenities and so on, which the experts here tonight can go into more detail. But thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Mr. Nelson?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and City Attorney. I'm here to talk about money again. Just the agenda statement itself says that the city's share of the road construction cost is an estimated $41,075,673. The funding for the city's share of the cost will come from the proceeds of road bonds issued by the city. Again, I see that we didn't put, this project started back in 2016. We haven't put any money away toward this project. We just bond it. The cost of the bonds and everything, we'll put it at $43 million. $43 million spread over, and I don't know what that's going to be. They're going to use road bonds. I don't know if we can take it to 20 years. But this is the same as the recreation, $45 million. Additionally, the scope of work includes water main and sanitary sewer infrastructure, improvements after along Mound Road right-of-way. The estimated city cost of the water and sanitary sewer improvements is $11,347,267. Funding for this portion of the Innovate Mound project is included in the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. Now, last meeting, you approved the work on replacing all the water meters. $12 million. Did we have any money put away for that? No, we did not. Bond it. Okay, this is getting us in serious trouble. Mr. Vanderpool kind of slapped me on the hand and said the city is getting all kinds of accolades about your budget. I don't care to hear that anymore. It's going up. We're going to $202 million in total indebtedness, and I include all of that. Another $12 million, we'll put it to $214 million. This 43 will raise our indebtedness to about $255 million. Now, this is out of control. We've got to be able to put money away. Like I said, in 2016, we started planning this. Did we think we'd have the money to pay for it? No, we didn't. We've got to stop the buy now, pay later fiscal policy that this council and the mayor has had. That's basically, the other thing is, I think we ought to go through, and I only have a minute. The overall program cost is shown as $236 million. Federal infra grant, $89 million. Sterling Heights total cost, $52 million. Warren total cost, $32 million. County cost, $61 million. This is a hell of a, with all that money, we could have done a lot of different roads in the city of Sterling Heights. And that's all I'll say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Anyone else on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
I have a brief question before I make the motion. If do I have to postpone to a date certain, would that be debatable? I want to be able to have a conversation before I make the motion, or would it?
Postponement to a date certain is non-debatable.
So it would just be a general postponement would be the most appropriate avenue?
I mean, well, whatever you think is appropriate, but an indefinite postponement would be debatable. It would just sort of disappear and never come back until we tell them to bring it back. I mean, you pulled this off. You don't need to do anything. Somebody else can make the motion, or you could make a motion to approve, to deny, to postpone, indefinitely postpone to a date certain, to table. I mean, you know, there are a number of options. Is there, Is there a motion you'd like to make?
Not at this time, Mr.
Okay, council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Okay, resolve to approve the cost-sharing agreement between the Macomb County Department of Roads, the City of Sterling Heights, and the City of Warren, and authorize the city manager and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city, and authorize the city manager to sign all future project documents on behalf of the city.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Mrs. Zarko.
I didn't pull this, so I'll wait and find out why it was pulled before I make any comments.
Okay, Mrs. Schmidt, same?
I'll wait.
All right, Mr. Radke, why don't you go ahead? and
Thank you.
I'll give you the floor.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for making the motion, Mrs. Zarko. I pulled this because over the course of this project, it has always been the city's contention that the east side of Mound Road would be repurposed with sidewalk like Van Dyke was done when they redid Van Dyke. And now, as the project is coming for us to pay our share, they are saying they are not going to put sidewalk on the east side of east side of Mound, which to me is a tremendous bait and switch with my constituents. I just can't believe it. You know, we are spending $217 million on a roadway. Our share of improvements to this roadway is $52 million. And the county and us, I guess, can't scrape together $1 million or a couple $1 million to completely redo the sidewalk on the east side of Mound. This thing was pitched to us as a multimodal, according to Councilman Yanes, he's completely right, a multimodal improvement for the people of Sterling Heights and the traffic of Sterling Heights. But what we're doing here is we're investing in cars over people. You know, I was thinking about this. You know, they said we're going to put a 10-foot pathway on the west side of Mound, which is great. I'm fully in support of that. But we're not going to put a pathway on the east side of Mound, and we're not going to connect the sidewalk. So what's a person going to do if they have to cross Mound Road? They're going to have to walk down to a mile road, because there's no interior pathways currently, really. There's no crosswalks that are not at mile roads. So you're going to have to walk a quarter mile or a half mile or even a full mile to the nearest mile road to cross the street, to then walk a half mile back the way you were coming to get to your house, wherever you're going. But what's really going to happen is people are going to jaywalk. They're going to walk through the pathway, they're going to walk through traffic, they're going to jaywalk, they're going to be struck by cars, and they're going to be killed because they don't have a safe way to navigate this street. So to me, I'm willing to postpone this contract. I want to postpone it to a date certain. I want word from the county. Why can we not protect the residents of Sterling Heights? Why can't we spend a few more $1 million on sidewalk? Because right now we're investing in cars for people to drive through our city, to drive from north to south. And we're not investing in the people who live in our city who have to live next to this roadway. They already put up with the noise. They already put up with the speed. They already put up with the traffic crashes. We can't even give them a sidewalk. And I think it's just unconscionable. So to me, I'd like to postpone this to a date certain. I'd tell the county to get on the phone and tell us why we can't have sidewalk on Mound Road. To me, if we're going to spend $52 million in improvements, as Mr. Nelson just discussed, and I think they're necessary. I mean, the idea that we shouldn't spend money unless we save it is completely antithetical to how bonding works. The whole idea of it, I mean, the infrastructure is so cheap for the government right now to bond because of interest rates. We're almost getting it for no cost comparatively. It's why you buy your house with a mortgage. You don't save up, then spend $300,000 a house. You buy a mortgage, but that's not the point. To me, this project deserves sidewalk. The residents there deserve sidewalk to be able to travel through our city in an easier way. I mean, I say this before, my mother was in a wheelchair. And if she wanted to go down Mound Road, she had to you have to push yourself in a wheelchair up to a mile road, cross the street, and then people don't live on the mile road, so they'd have to go back into the subdivision. So you're going to have to travel almost twice as far because we're making it easier for cars to go down Mound Road than people. And that just absolutely blows my mind. That's all I have right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, anyone else? If I might, is it, I'm sorry, Mr. Schmidt, was it? Griffith, sorry, Griffith. Do you mind coming up here and maybe I'll ask you, do you have any, can you give any insight or background on how the initial proposal went from, you know, talking about these 10-foot paths on both sides to where we are now?
Sure.
If you know.
Yeah, I can discuss it to some extent. I was not involved. Our firm, H&TB, represents Macomb County as the owner's rep for the Innovate Mound project. We are not involved in the development of the infra grant. We did, however, come on board after the infra grant was approved by USDOT to carry the project through preliminary design and procurement and then through construction. When we were initially looking at the scope of the project, one of the concerns was limited right-of-way throughout the corridor, especially on the north end of the project where we're widening it from 3 lanes to 4 lanes in each direction. The infra grant term sheet, or when the infra grant was submitted, it was pretty clear that the county believed they did not need additional right-of-way. There has since, through our preliminary engineering, been determined that small right-of-way parcels were needed throughout the corridor. But that was more to facilitate that 8 or 10-foot pathway on the west side of the roadway. So there just wasn't an adequate right-of-way on both sides of the roadway to allow for 2 shared use or 10-foot paths. Additionally, there was concerns with the need to widen the Plumbrook Creek structure. The bridges over the Plumbrook Creek require widening to facilitate the sidewalk through there. And we are widening the westbound structure, or the west structure, which is southbound Mound Road. We're widening that out to accommodate the pathway. However, the east side is only being widened to address the roadway widening. So that has hydraulic analysis or hydraulic impacts to the Plumbrook Creek. So that had to be accounted for as well. Additionally, there's a free-flowing movement at northbound Mound Road at 18.5 mile, which would eliminate the ability to cross 18.5 mile road on the east side of the roadway. With the current traffic configuration, that northbound Mound movement to 18.5 miles free-flowing, even when traffic is stopped to allow that 18.5 mile traffic on the southbound Mound, there's a green signal phase that allows traffic to continue to turn right on 18.5 mile. So when looking at that and determining what that would do to traffic operations throughout the corridor, it created large congestion problems throughout the corridor when we did our traffic operation analysis. Adding pedestrian signals there or adding a red phase to allow that traffic to stop and pedestrians to safely cross the roadway there.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your information. Mr. Vanderpool, when we do, like when we do expansions on, when we close sidewalk caps, and when we do it on county-owned roads, what is the typical, do we foot the whole bill? Do we get 50/50 from the county? How does it generally work?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a good question. I'll give you, just by way of example, the 18-mile road project was a county road project, and we had to work through getting easements. We did not have all the easements in that particular case, and we worked with the county collaboratively, and we were able to negotiate with those property owners. It's more of an art than a science. We had to negotiate getting the easement agreements, and in return, you know, they did not have to, some of those property owners did not have to pay for the sidewalk gap then. In other cases, we have paid the property owners directly, and then they had to pay for the sidewalk. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a wash. And all these are a little different in terms of circumstances. But the bottom line is, while there isn't easement agreements in place on Mound, that's not to say that that cannot be done over time. Certainly it's challenging. Sometimes it takes years to get the proper easement agreements. In the case of 18-mile road, we did it in months. In other cases, it's taken us years to get easement agreements. So I certainly don't think the sidewalk should be ruled out here. I think, you know, it could be part of a second phase, and it would be interesting to hear from the county, you know, how that second phase would be funded long-term, whether it's a year from now or 3 years from now.
Okay, so looking at Mound Road, going north from about 14 to 14 and a half, there seems to be sidewalks on the east side. From 14 and a half north, it's very spotty, right? So we're getting all the way to 18 mile, and there's a lot of gaps. I appreciate the concern about that traffic movement at 18 and a half mile. I'm very familiar with that, as I'm sure most of our, residents who are watching at home are as well. It's hard to imagine how the sidewalk would work there without interrupting vehicular traffic, right? Or building a very costly bridge over that, which I don't know that I would necessarily support that. I'm not entirely clear on the details of the Plum Brook drain, but I suffice to say from what you said, it's a complication. Look, I appreciate Mr. Radke's passion about this. I agree with him in principle, but I don't know that we can stop Mound Road and stop this project to begin the process of obtaining those easements and going through. I mean, we've got, 5 miles of easements that we'd have to get. And I don't know what that would take. I mean, do you have any estimate, Mr. Vanderpool, of what that would, it's to go from, just putting aside, even if we didn't put any sidewalk at the Plum Brook drain or at 18 and a half mile, we're still looking at 4 to 4.5 miles of gap. Do you have any estimate of A, what it would cost, and B, what time frame we're looking at to get all the legalities in place?
Mayor, I have a rough estimate, but I do not want to throw out a number. Our city engineer is here, and I think he would have a much better estimate, and that is Brent Bayshaw, if you don't mind me calling on him.
I don't. I'm sure he does. It's good to have employees you can punt to,
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
which is what I was doing to you. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Bayshaw.
It is a tough question to ask. I know we did an estimate on the sidewalk on the east side, and it was somewhere around $800,000. That did not include the easement acquisition. Like Mark is correct, it is a lengthy process to go through. It usually takes many months is a quick way to get the easement. It usually takes much longer than that. And as far as the costs go, it usually depends on the square footage of the property and how it evaluates. And instead of taking a guess, I guess we could talk as an example, the easement acquisition on 18 Mile Road was a similar cost to the sidewalk installation.
So there's not already a right-of-way, there's got to be a right-of-way there already, isn't there? Or there's no, so, and we can't put the sidewalk in the right-of-way without negotiating an easement with the property owner?
I'm not sure where the easements would be required, but from what the county has told us and their advisors is that easements would be required.
So some of it, is it fair to say that in some of the areas, we'd have the right-of-way, and some of the areas we don't?
We have a uniform 204-foot right-of-way, the county does. Sometimes, there's instances where there's obstacles or you can't fit the right-of-way or the sidewalk in due to the design that you would have to go further outside the right-of-way.
I understand.
So you'd have to take a detailed look.
Okay. Do you have any, do you have any opinion on, so initially we were sort of thinking that we were going to have these paths on either side. What was originally the plan going to be at 18 and a half mile and over the Plum Brook drain? Do you know if that had been realized or if it was something that we were just going to cross when we got there? Do you know what the plan was originally?
You would either have to widen out that bridge or put a pedestrian bridge. And then at 18 and a half mile, I know the concern was safety and like Mr. Griffith said, what he mentioned about traffic and the cycles of traffic. And they had a concern about, is it going to be safe when you have a constant movement of traffic to, have a pedestrian crossing there where you hit the button and it turns red. And is it, a vehicle's going to honor that or realize that when it's most of the time it's green? So they had a safety concern about crossing 18.5-mile road.
Okay. I mean, my feeling is that I would like to see us work with the county collaboratively to close as many of those gaps on the east side as we can. But I don't feel comfortable holding up this project indefinitely or even for months and months. I mean, if we don't get things going, we could jeopardize the first year of the project. So that's how I feel in terms of the other issue that was brought up. And I respect, Mr. Nelson, that you don't want to spend money. You don't want the city spending money. You don't want the city incurring debt. But, you know, when debt is so cheap, the reality is, what were we going to do starting in 2016? You know, we could have said, we're going to increase taxes so that we can save, you know, $10 million a year for the next 5 years. And you'd come to us and said, that's outrageous. Don't raise taxes. You know, I mean, I don't know what more can be said. That when debt is so incredibly cheap, nobody says to somebody making $80,000 a year, you're taking out a $200,000 mortgage on a house. Well, yeah, that's a lot of debt, but debt can be used wisely. And I think any financial person will tell you that. Sterling Heights has relatively low debt. We can manage it. We can pay it. We're not in danger of defaulting on it. We have a very high bond rating, and we can use it for good. I mean, we're not just taking on loads of debt for meaningless projects. Mound Road received the single largest federal grant for a local road project in the United States history, which to me signifies how important Mound Road is. We said it when we were in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. We told the White House, we told the legislators, we told anybody that would listen, and a lot of people did. We had 7 or 8 meetings in the course of one day. And we said, if there's a more deserving project, give them the money. But you can literally see Mound Road from the International Space Station. Like when you look at Metro Detroit, Mound Road stands apart. Our industrial corridor stands apart. You can identify it from 150 miles in the sky. So that's how important this project is. That's why I'm supporting it. I'd like to do something about the sidewalk, but I don't think I can at this point. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Zarf.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. We've talked about doing shared projects with other government entities for our American Relief Funds. And if we could look at the guidelines and find out if that sidewalk project could be shared with the county and use some of those funds to take care of the gap on the east side of Mound Road. If we could research that. And as we're, you know, and it might happen sooner than later. So if we could do that, that would be great. And while we're at it, if we could put the guidelines for the American Relief Funds on our website so that residents can go there and see what our guidelines are as we begin to make decisions on how that money will be spent. I think that they could look at it and know that we'll be spending it wisely. And I think through the chair, to whoever can answer my question, was another reason why this was put on hold on the east side was because most of that is industrial rather than residential as far as why it was delayed, well, actually omitted, but now we're trying to make sure that it's just delayed in, for that gap. Was that part of the reason? Was it because it's industrial?
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Zarko, you're absolutely correct. The county took a look at it, and in some cases, there is some sidewalk extension on the east side to get an individual to a mile marker crossing. So they did thoughtfully extend the sidewalk where individuals could do that. But the logical conclusion, too, is that there would be greater use on the west side due to the rooftop access on the west side and the like. And there are good crossings now at the mile roads, unlike, years ago. So we have signalized crossing and audio crossing in some cases. So, that will help improve the pedestrian mobility along Mound Road as well.
And I have to agree, I think my biggest concern would be for the split to go to the roundabout off of Mound Road, is to how people would cross there, because it wouldn't, I don't think it'd be possible at all. So if we could look into what we can do instead of what we can't do, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. Through the chair to, well, I'm not sure who can answer this, but, so the bulk of this project is being paid by a federal grant. So when that grant, the grant was applied for, this path was on both sides of Mound. So I know how particular grants are. Can it be altered after the grant was given with the path on both sides?
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Schmidt, that's a very good insight. As I mentioned earlier, when the grant was initially, the application initially submitted, what we had were engineering preliminary analyses and concept plans. So nothing in terms of the scope was etched in stone at that point in time. And in addition, as good as it is that we got 97 million, as the mayor mentioned, the only, local agency in the country's history where this has happened. Normally it goes to state road departments. Even though we got 97 million, they being the federal government, cut 30 million from our initial request. So they fully knew that, there's going to have to be something creatively done to get all the scope in the project. Now, of that 30 million that was cut, the good news is just recently through some additional grant funding, it is likely that the project will get another 10 million. But the point of it all is that there was nothing in terms of the actual scope that was completely etched in stone at that point in time. That's the best I can tell you at this point.
Okay, and then also through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool, in your presentation, I believe you said that some of the gaps will be filled, but not all of them. Can you give me a ballpark as to how much will remain that is open now?
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Schmidt, I don't have the number at my fingertips, but I would say, the extensions that they're making, isn't going to close 50% of the gaps. It might close, 10, 20%. We're still going to have some significant gaps on the east side. But again, where there are businesses and where there likely is going to be some foot traffic logically to the nearest mile road, that is where the county decided to be prudent to make extensions in those cases.
Okay. As far as easement agreements, is that the county's responsibility or our responsibility if we were to pursue more easements on that east side?
Well, that's another good question, Councilwoman Schmidt. In the case of 18 Mile Road, we just worked hand in hand. We were more anxious to get 18 Mile Road done and get that sidewalk in. So we really took the lead on the sidewalk easement agreements, and the county did not have a problem with that. So, it's just more of a collaborative process and working hand in hand with our partners at the county.
Okay. And as far as, money that we're spending here on infrastructure, it would be derelict of duty if we don't update our infrastructure when we have the opportunity to do that. And with this road under construction, there's no better time to do that. So I'm very comfortable with us moving forward with the project. And my final comment is it Mr. Bailey, you're the ombudsman? You don't have to get up. I just, God bless you, because you're giving yourself 24/7 access to the world about this project, and that is a huge undertaking as well. So good luck to you, sir, and I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Yanez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a number of things here, and First of all, let me just say this about the indebtedness, and I don't like debt. I appreciate the fact that we have cheap debt. I don't like debt, period. But we also have to have progress, right? And I think when this project first came about, we were talking about Mound Road generating $5 billion a year in economic activity, and I haven't done the math, but when you're looking at how much debt we're putting into this and the cost of that debt, against $5 billion a year of economic activity, it's an absolute must. It's an absolute must. Mound Road had become an extremely dangerous road. It was a monument to American failure that we cannot keep up our infrastructure. And now we got to catch up. And debt is the price we're paying. I do appreciate your thoughts on that. And I think we think a lot alike when it comes to debt, but there's good debt and there's bad debt, and I think this is going to be very good debt for the city of Sterling Heights and the people of Southeast Michigan. This was a project that was supposed to be multimodal, and I get it that the east side of Mound Road is industrial. South of 19 Mile Road, I don't think anybody lives there. But I can't help to think that, one, there's a way. So traffic's not heavy on Mound Road every day. Saturdays and Sundays when people are out riding their bikes or doing whatever. The traffic is definitely lighter. I get the 18.5 mile road part of it, but who's to say you can't turn a sidewalk down to 18.5 mile road and maybe cross over at some other point? You don't have to cross at that, constant light. That would be a very dangerous thing. But, it's just thinking about this in a different way. And the other thing I think about is just thinking about the future, not just about the now, but the future. So quite often we heard, several years back when we were talking about the RTA, the rapid transit, and, should we do it or not? And we talked about the bus stops and how much economic activity there is at a bus stop, or if you have a subway stop, and things are built around that stop because they know people are going to be there waiting to get on a bus, getting off a bus, and so forth. And I can't help to think, even though people don't live on the east side of Mound, south of 19 Mile Road, what kind of activity would be created by having a sidewalk there? By having this multimodal piece of concrete or strip that people will be using? What's going to pop up there? What will businesses in the area be able to do with that piece of property? And I certainly can't help to think that GM using Mound Road for their autonomous vehicles, testing them, if one of our businesses came up with a device that needed a sidewalk to test their device, we'd be jumping all over, why aren't we putting a sidewalk in? So maybe the right people aren't asking for the sidewalk. And as far as the right people goes, we talk about this grant coming from Washington. That's our money. That's some magic pot of money that the federal government has that doesn't belong to anybody else. They don't have their own Bitcoin. That's our money. That's our money coming back here to build our road for our businesses, to serve our people. And that's what the sidewalk, just a little imagination, that's what this sidewalk may do. It might not do anything. It might just crumble and go away and we never use it. But we don't know that until we build it. What somebody with a little bit of imagination says, this is what I can do with this little piece of property, whether it's, bicycling or segwaying or walking or running or what have you. I just think that we're not using our imagination. We are selling the taxpayers short by not doing this. And frankly, if it gets held up, it gets held up. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Mr. Bailey or someone, I would just like to make a suggestion. If money seems to be an issue as far as the sidewalk is concerned, can you consider maybe the steel light fixtures? I don't know exactly how many are there, what their cost is, but maybe eliminate those and put that towards sidewalks? Would that be something that could work?
Thank you. That's a good question. One of the components of the infra grant was unified lighting throughout the corridor. So we are going with the energy efficient LED lighting throughout the entire corridor that'll be consistent. As well as that, we are also removing we are relocating the overhead transmission power lines from the median, and DTE is relocating those to the east side of the roadway as well to allow kind of that more green space appeal to the median. That is something that could be looked at, but right now the contract's already out to bid, so it would be a change order to the contract as well. And then we'd still have the concern of adding the right-of-way in the time frame necessary for the design builder to construct that under the current project.
Okay, well, that was just a suggestion if money seemed to be an issue, and of course, I'm a big proponent of these sidewalks, especially anybody that's working on that side of Mound Road, because we've always called Mound Road our golden corridor, not Hall Road, Mound Road, because that's what brought the business in. So just a hopeful thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. You can go ahead and sit down, Mr. Griffiths. I'm not going to ask you any more questions. I think you've had a lot. So I'm just going to offer my opinion on this, and I happen to agree with Mr. Radke and Mr. Yanez and all of us who have said that, yes, sidewalks are extremely important. I travel a lot as a nurse, driving back and forth to work and to see patients if I need to or supervise my staff. And what I see and what I have seen is people jetting across Mound, running, and just Joe Schmo trying to get across over to Shap, or they're trying to get to where their plants that they need to get to, not Shap. But it's really concerning to me. I think, oh goodness gracious, I have job security, because I'm worried for their safety. So safety is a very big concern. I do want us to pursue and to be creative in what we can do to make sure that we close these sidewalk gaps. Mr. Vanderpool, I know that you've already been given some direction there, so I'm not going to redirect, but I do want to say that that's extremely important. We do have multimodal needs. I love to bike. I'd rather be out there biking than driving many days. So it's important that we have safe areas. I don't want to hold up this project, however, for that reason, but we do need to investigate and explore our options, continue to work with the county, at the county level, to see about obtaining those easements and see what we can do. So I'm going to go ahead and vote for this, but I am going to ask that we please continue to look very seriously at making sure that we have safe residential or foot traffic and bike traffic. So thank you very much.
Mr. Radke.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, everyone else spoke, so I got some more ideas while I was sitting here. One thing I'd like to say, based upon Mr. Bayshaw's estimates, 800,000 for sidewalk, 800,000 for easements, it's 1.6 million, but it's 0.006%, less than 1%, 0.5% basically, of the entire project cost for these sidewalks. We're talking about like a nickel of the entire project, and they seem unwilling to work with us, and that's what I find the most frustrating. Looking at the plans in our packet here, you see sidewalk on both sides. Everyone who's told us said there's going to be sidewalk on both sides. Now they're saying, well, it wasn't in the specific scope of work. So a lighting scheme for cars to drive and for autonomous transit, that's in the scheme, that's required. But sidewalks, people don't get hit by those same cars, is not. I find that to be tragic. And I haven't gotten a good answer from the county why. I think there's been a lot of this, well, we didn't think about that. We've been talking about Mound Road and sidewalks and everything else for 4 years I've been on council now. So I think it's kind of sad for the ombudsman and the people who are directing the project to come here and say, well, this is the first time hearing about it. It's not the first that you're hearing about it. It's been talked about incessantly. Until this meeting, until last week when we got these email packet from our city engineer, it was my expectation that sidewalk was going to be in the job. I didn't know I had to advocate for it. I didn't know I had to fight about it. But now here we are, and I find it to be utterly frustrating. You know, all I hear are excuses. We hired a lobby firm to help us get this grant. The city worked hard on this. We worked with Warren to get this. And now we're saying, you know, that it's just going to be tough. I think it's crazy. You know, Councilman Yanis brought up a great point. Talk about the quick buses, quick rapid transit. Mountain would be the perfect corridor for rapid transit. It's fast, it's industrial, it's where people will get people 2 jobs. And if the bus rolls up Mound on the east side, it spits people out, and they have no way to walk to those jobs. I hate to get all worked up about this, but it just blows my mind. And we talk about handicap access. I thought the comments from the representatives here about 18.5 mile are insane. I know that a Supreme Court justice got on the Supreme Court fighting these very cases. This idea that we have to have a constant flow of traffic, that somehow people should not be able to cross the street. It's an inconvenience for people who live here to cross the street because cars from elsewhere are passing by. I think that that's insane. And we do have residential on the east side of Mound. Now, it's mostly in the northern part, but I guess they can't go south. They have to cross the street and then cross the street again. We're not making it easy to not drive your car around. And we talk all day long about trying to make it easier for people to walk, to bike, to take any other means of transit. And yet here we are saying, another day. But that's been the response always, another day. Then we have someone like Mr. Nelson who's screaming about the amount of money we're spending. And if we bring millions of dollars of sidewalk improvements to this board, he's going to scream about that too. He's going to say, how can we spend $2 million on the sidewalk? We're spending all this money. We should have put it aside. It's crazy. We have the opportunity here at 0.006% of the total cost. They've had 3 years. They seem to have been able to secure all the easements on the west side of the street, or they're still doing that in the build, the prep build thing we're doing here. But we can't do it for the east side. We need to do it. I sit on the MML Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and right now we've been discussing drones for delivery, drones for pizza. Do they go down the sidewalk? Do they go through the street? All these interesting things. I think Councilman Yanis hit on the right thing here. We are building into this roadway driverless cars because industry wants it. If we had Amazon is on the corridor. Maybe they want sidewalk to test their drones. I think it's crazy here. It seems like the fat cat is getting fed, and the residents who want to just be able to cross the street and run up and down Mountain Road are being shafted. And to me, it's crazy. So this motion will probably fail, but I'll make a motion to postpone this item to our, July 20th council meeting to be discussed and hopefully have a response from the county. I move that.
Second.
It's been moved and supported. There is no debate, so we'll need a roll call vote. Mrs. Riska, can we have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Kosky?
Yes.
Mr. Radke?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mrs. Sarowski?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Yanas?
Yes.
And Mrs. Yarko?
No.
Motion carries 4-3. This item is postponed to the July 20th meeting. Mr. Radke made his motion quickly.
Do you want to speak again? I apologize.
No, I don't think we need to. I'm just wondering if, just for clarity's sake, I can bring this up under new business, but it seems to me that the purpose of the postponement was to go to the county and use these next 2 weeks to try to work something out. Do you need any further direction on that from the city council? We can wait till the end of the meeting so it's proper under our rules to discuss it more, unless you want to just discuss it now.
Mayor, I think it would be good if we did have clear direction without any objection to.
Okay, let's wait till the end of the meeting. We'll go to communications from citizens at this point, I believe, right?
Yes.
Communications from citizens is the next item on our agenda tonight. So anyone on any item not on tonight's agenda? Yes, sir, Mr. Manny.
Good evening, members of council. Hope everyone is doing well. Just have a few questions for Mr. Vanderpool. I appreciate the Sterling Heights Police for patrolling areas that needed it the most, such as Metro Parkway and Ryan Road. On behalf of speaking to the residents, few residents, they would ask for an increased police patrol in areas such as Franklin Park, Fox Hill, and Pondview Drive because of residents speeding and people drag racing in the middle of the night. Also, I've noticed on a daily basis individuals panhandling near areas of Ryan Road and plazas of the Dream Market supermarket, also in areas of DeQuinder Road, also in parking lots and churches. Just want to ask if our city prohibits panhandling. If not, would that be put into consideration? Also, a few council meetings ago, I mentioned that 16 Mile in DeQuinder needed some attention. You mentioned that it would be scheduled to be repaired next year. However, parts of DeQuinder have been repaired but wasn't included in the list of road repair our city has planned for this year. Can you give me more information with regards to how the city is funding that repair? Also, will we be seeing a road repair along 15 to 18 Mile in Ryan sometime next year? Sorry, I just have a lot of questions. I wasn't here in the past few council meetings. I also want to say something about the 18 to 19 Mile in Ryan bike trail. Residents have complained that there is, one bench instead of 4 benches that are proposed. Also, they had complained about dead pine trees that were newly planted last year. They also mentioned that those pine trees are currently under warranty for a 1-year warranty. I just want to ask if the city is doing something about it before the expiration date deadline. Also, a few meetings ago, I mentioned that some ponds needed to be cleaned around 18 and 19 Mile area. I just wanted to know, follow up with that, and when will that take place? Also, finally, I just want to ask if Mr. Yanez, will there be any cleanups happening soon? I would like to create 2 teams, one for the West, one for the East. Possibly you handle the East, I handle the West, like an all-star game, NBA all-star game kind of thing. Who would win? But also, if there are cleanups areas that need the most attention, of course, those 2 groups can unite and handle that. I feel that as a city, we must work together. As we work together, there we can be united. Because at the end of the day, we need to achieve something, and to achieve something is what the residents need. That's all I have for today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Manny. Anyone else? Mr. Nelson?
Okay, understand. I took a look in on all the credit and everything. That was completely uncalled for, but that's okay. While we're taking credit out, why don't we bond all of our infrastructure, sleeving of our water mains and sleeving of our sewers? That's my understanding of how they're going to fix the basic problem. Mayor Taylor, you and I live within one subdivision of each other. The other thing that I want to bring up is whoever let the county shut down one whole side of Shaner Road, the northbound side, and allowed one lane in the southbound side, they need to check to see how much traffic they backed up all over the place. What it also shows is that we don't have enough east-west access through our city. 14 goes through, 15 goes through, 16 goes through, 17 stops at Shaner, 18 stops at Dodge Park, or Utica Road, excuse me. 19 stops at Van Dyke. We don't have roads that go north and south between Van Dyke and Shaner. Somebody authorized the building of a house in what used to be the 18-mile right-of-way. Okay, that whole right-of-way now, I think there's a bunch of property back there that is landlocked when they allowed that to happen. There was big discussions 24 years ago on putting 18, Ms. Kotsky, you'd remember that. I remember. And putting 18-mile road through. And we had a lady in Washington Square that really fought it, and I fought right back at her. She won in the end. But it's showing us that, you know, you're talking about all this traffic that's going to be going up and down Mound Road. They have no place between 16 Mile Road and Hall Road to exit and to go through our city into Clinton Township or going into Shelby Township or Macomb Township. They have no place to do that. We better start looking at the rest of our road plan. And I would really like to know who allowed that house to be built in the 18-mile roadway, what was going to be. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Anyone else under communications from citizens? If not, I'll close that portion and go on to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, anything tonight?
Just quickly, I can comment on a couple of questions. First, panhandling is not allowed. If anyone is doing anything on sidewalks, they have to be moving. They cannot be standing in place, and they must remain on the sidewalks. So we have addressed those concerns in the past, and we'll continue to do so. 16 Mile Road is scheduled to be improved by the county next year. From Ryan over to DeQuinder. I think I mentioned that at one of our prior city council meetings. So next year, that'd be 2022. Ryan Road, we have a massive project scheduled for Ryan Road. That will also include some federal funding. That's programmed for 2023. The dead trees along the new nature path will be replaced during the dormant season, so later on this year. We obviously inventory those and make sure they're covered under warranty. Pretty routine to have some natural die-off, so we're on top of that. We do spend a significant amount of money improving our water and sewer mains in any given year, including sleeving and lining and the like. So I think that's all I can respond to quickly this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Koszybski? The one
Nothing,
item for
we have
closed
3
session.
items tonight, Mayor.
2 items?
3.
3 items, 2 legal opinions. I got you.
On labor.
Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Nelson asked about this house on Salt. I don't understand it either. I kept meaning to ask you. It's right in the middle of the 18-mile easement, which is, we live right next to it. When I take my dog for a walk, I walk by it every time. I don't understand it. And my son says, oh, they built that new house. Are they going to put the grass in too? And their grass is not good. Okay, it's like the weeds from, my 5-year-old says that. I don't know what happened here. I don't understand it. I don't understand how they could build a house right in the easement. Do you know?
Mayor, I don't have
mean
an
to put you
answer,
on the
but I'll
spot.
look into it and report back to you and council.
Okay. I mean, I don't expect that 18 miles ever going to go through, but it could go from Hayes to Shaner. I wouldn't like it. That would not be ideal, but I'm just saying that because I live close to there. The point's well taken, Mr. Nelson, but the problem is you talk to our firefighters, they deal with it all the time. They got to get, to get across the river, it takes a lot of planning. So and the other problem is, we could put 18-mile road all the way through, but I mean, if you follow it across, you're going right through the middle of Dodge Park. I mean, that easement passes right behind where the bridge is into the park. I don't know. I'm willing to put up with a lot of inconvenience in order to avoid having 18-mile road go through Dodge Park. That would be horrific to me. And I don't know what else you can do. Getting across the river is not easy. Okay, anyone else, council?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt?
First of all, through the chair to you, where on the easement is this house?
It's right here.
So it's like right on
See it
the
right there?
east side of Saul.
Saul, okay.
East side of
It's
Saul,
right across from the easement.
right in the middle of the easement.
Okay.
I don't understand it.
Okay.
I mean, who did they buy that property from?
I was trying to picture where this new house was. Okay.
It's right there, too.
Just a couple of announcements to the residents. I received numerous phone calls about trash pickup this week. There is no delay in trash pickup. I think we put that out there, but people just automatically assume when there's a holiday on, well, it was Sunday, however, most people have Monday off, that trash would be delayed. So there is regular trash pickup this week. And I know nobody likes to get their tax bill in the mail, but I got mine today. And I took a good look at it and did some math. And I have to say, it's kind of shell-shocking to open the bill. However, when you look at it, the actual money coming to the city for general operating and all of our millage fees is really only 1/3 of my tax bill. The rest are schools and the county and everyone else. So I can't be mad at the city because I am getting an amazing bang for my buck. However, the other entities, I can be a little irritated with. So I just wanted to say that, everybody thinks that the city is getting all of this tax money. We're not. Look at your bill. We get about 1/3 of your tax bill. And the summer bill is the big bill. So with that, I have nothing further.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, anyone else? Mr. Yanez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really quick in response to Mr. Manny, there is a cleanup sponsored by the Clinton Rivershed Water Council on July 21st at Delia Park from 10 a.m. to noon. I will be there. I encourage anybody who's listening or watching, join us to help keep a wonderful park in Sterling Heights clean. It's appropriate that we had this ordinance, this odor ordinance today, especially because it was made very clear that even a legally sanctioned operation, I guess for the lack of a better term, such as growing marijuana, could trigger an odor ordinance. And the reason why I find that appropriate tonight is because we just got done with the 4th of July celebration, and I had a neighbor who thought the best way to celebrate freedom, independence, and liberty is by blowing off a bunch of M80s. It was obnoxious to the regular person. I can't imagine what it did to people with PTSD, people with pets. These aren't Black Cat firecrackers. These are quarter sticks of dynamite. And I bet he blew off about 20 of them all Saturday long, all Saturday afternoon. And you know what? I went, while he was blowing them off, I took my city-provided iPad here and I went and checked our ordinances and I looked at our noise ordinance. And if we can stop people from growing marijuana on their private property because of the odor, well, then I think we can stop people from using M80s on 4th of July or whatever celebration the law allows because of our noise ordinance. I noticed our noise ordinance didn't have a decibel level either, but that's okay. I'm all for, look, I was dead against the fireworks law. We had more important things to do in Lansing, and I think that's the best that Lansing could do at that time is pass a fireworks law. If you want to shoot off fireworks on the 4th of July, it's great, whatever, do it, enjoy. But quarter sticks of dynamite they're dangerous, they're annoying, they're unnecessary. I can go through that whole list of things for the odor ordinance and apply them to a noise ordinance. And we need to do something about that. If we can do something about the odor, we can do something about the noise. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Mr. Attorney. And the next thing, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool, unfortunately the police chief isn't here today. I would like to get an update on our Slow Your Roll program. Because when I'm on Metro Parkway, nobody is slowing their roll. I'm getting blown by. It's unbelievable how fast people travel on that road. And it's just, and it's still not just Metro Parkway. I was on Mound Road, speaking of Mound Road, the other day. And there was one of those pickup trucks that are built really low to the ground. Had to be easily 90 to 100 miles an hour. Easily. At 9 o'clock at night. And even though they had the green light at the intersection of 17 and Mound, he still blew through there. You never know what's coming through, if somebody's going to run a red light or not. Without hesitation, it's horrific. So I would certainly like to hear from the police chief what kind of progress they've made, how many tickets they've written, what kind of interaction they're having with people on the Slow Your Roll program, and see if people are really slowing their roll. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Zarko.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Briefly, though, I'm going to agree with Mr. Yanez about our fireworks, and I wasn't here in Sterling Heights to hear them this year, but I know what they've been like in the past. I think the biggest issue is local control. And we have a statewide law that tells people when they can shoot off fireworks and when they can't. The difference is you can go out to Imway City, you might go to Armada, and people are spread out so far apart that you don't notice maybe the sounds. But in Southeast Michigan, when we have lots that are 60 feet wide, and everybody can do this, I think that's where the problem is we need to get more local control back. And I know that currently, right now, we've been asked for support for short-term rentals throughout the state that might not affect Sterling Heights as they would Charlevoix or Traverse City, or where people rent condos, their homes, for just a short amount of time. So if we could get the same group of people together to help us with to get back local control, so we can, put our own ordinances in place for fireworks, I think that would be helpful. And I think it's a perfect example is how we work together where it's not something that maybe affects us directly, but it's in the best interest of the state. So I would really like to work on getting more local control for fireworks back into our city. So let's see how we can do that. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarko. Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I had the same thought of you as you thinking about 18 Mile going through. It would again speed up traffic, but it would basically cut Dodge Park in half. I think it would just destroy the park. So I'm absolutely against that. Briefly, through the chair to Mr. Koszubski, Mr. Manny brought up panhandling, and I know folks get very upset when they see panhandlers in the city. I get upset too, but I get upset because someone who's panhandling, I feel for them because this is how they're trying to raise some money. This is, I guess my question to you is, it's not against the law to be poor, correct, Mr. Koszubski? And that basically, even though people are panhandling, one of the reasons we hired this new social worker this year was hopefully to help try to get some more resources so that there's, what we can do right now is call the police. And that's not a good situation because this person really isn't doing anything wrong besides, I guess, offending the eyesight of whoever sees them panhandling. So I guess to me, I'm glad we hired the social worker to hopefully provide more resources to the indigent community in Sterling Heights. Well, I'm not advocating for anyone to panhandle, but at the same time, I'm not going to, what are we supposed to do? Arrest them? Throw them in jail because they're so poor that they're begging on the street? It just smacks of like 18th, 17th century London, we're arresting people for being poor, which to me is just utterly insane. So I'm glad we have a social worker. I'm glad that our police are trained to hopefully provide resources to these individuals and to also hopefully get them off the street. I guess I answered my own question, Mr. Koszubski, so you did a great job.
I was going to say.
I guess, and then finally, what Mr. Yanez said, brought up what happened to me on the way to the meeting today. Someone blew the light on 16 Mile and Dodge Park, just totally just ran the light while we were all going through, just blew through it like it was nobody's business. And I remember thinking, oh, geez, this is crazy. His roll wasn't slowed. He just rolled right through. So hopefully if we get a report on that, because he barely avoided having a multi-car accident, because we had the light, we were traveling through the intersection, and someone just right through it, going westbound, so, going very fast. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Sarowski?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So this obviously has been the weekend after, Tuesday after the 4th of July weekend. And with Memorial Day, with my son being promoted, it's been really bringing to mind some of the patriotic things that I've been thinking about. And there's one person I need to talk about very briefly, but I do want to bring him up because his name was Mike Adregna. Mike Adregna. His given name was Marco, but he always went by Mike. And so Mike was Sterling Heights resident. He was a Marine who served in Korean War. And he served the entire time in that war. He was a member of the Legion Post 44, the VFW Post 6250, the Marine Corps Association, Korean War Veterans Association, the 1st Marine Division, the Chosen Few Division, and that's just some of the things he was a member of. And he was also the executive director of the Korean War Memorial. So he was very involved both as a soldier and as a veteran. He ran our Veterans Day ceremony here in Sterling Heights for many, many, many years. And what made him very special, and what I was thinking about on Memorial Day, was those granite memorials that we have at our Veterans Memorial, Mike designed and created most of them. He had those privately funded, and he donated those to the city. Almost every single one of them. One was done after he passed, because he passed away 11 years ago very suddenly of a heart attack, sudden cardiac death, and it was very sad. He was a very dear friend of mine, obviously, and my family's. I have a Marine because he was the Marine in our family. So without objection from my council members, I would like to request from administration to prepare a motion and bring back to council at the next meeting to name the current Veterans Memorial that we have that is unnamed, the Memorial Garden outside of the hall there. I would like it to be named the Mike Adregna Veterans Memorial Garden, if that is all possible. Do I have any other concerns or objections?
I hear no objection. I think you have clear direction to bring that before council. Thank you for that,
Yep.
Mrs. Sarowski.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Koski?
Thank you. Just a couple comments in regard to 18 Mile Road. Yes, Mr. Nelson, I do remember. Group wanted to put it through, and what I remember is the county, of course, owns 18 Mile Road, and they said, no, it's too expensive, too much money. No, we can't afford it. So that was the end of that. And there was thoughts of doing it at a later date, and then the last I heard was that they were going to sell off the easements. So maybe that's why the house was built. In regard to water bills, to the chair, to Mr. Vanderpool, the water bills going out now, are they including the new information in regard to our restructure as far as the water system is concerned?
Mr. Vanderpool?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Koski, yes, the new water bills will have a flyer, and we'll talk about the new water rate structure, which significantly reduces summertime water bills, especially related to irrigation. Also explains the new meter program and the rollout, which is really beginning in this month and will continue for 6 months, at least readers on the outside of homes. And then we'll actually start the meter replacement inside the homes, which will take about another 1.5 years or so. So we have a lot of public information being pushed out.
One question in regard to that bill that's going out now, what period exactly does it cover? Does it cover the prior 3 months, like a couple months ago?
That's correct. It's always billing for the 3 months prior that just ended.
But is it a total of like 4 or 5 months prior to the bill actually
It's a
being printed?
3-month billing cycle, so quarterly.
Okay, because the question was, is the credit applied now as far as the sewer billing is concerned? If it's March, April, May, or is it April, May, and June?
Yeah, the average winter consumption starts this quarter, so we'll get clarification on that, make sure it's crystal clear in the flyer and on the billing insert as well.
Yeah, I was asked that question, and I said, just check the date on the bill, because I believe it does show on the bill the period that it does cover, and I said sometimes it's like 4 months prior, because it takes a while to put the bill together and get it in the mail, so very good.
For certain, it will hit for the summer irrigation months. That's the good news.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so just to put a bow on the Saul Road issue, not that it really does, it just adds more questions. Actually, I found the deed that was signed in March of 2021 by an individual gentleman to a couple for that house. And so we'll go back and find where he got it from, and on and on and on. But it's funny, it says, it gives the legal description, and then it says, subject to the rights of the public for roadway purposes along Saul Road and to all other easements of record. So I don't know, maybe it goes right through his kitchen. I mean, maybe
That'd be
he's
a
left
tough
some room in the kitchen.
That'd be a tough day for him, wouldn't it?
I guess, I mean, I don't know. Don't we get some rights to doesn't the public have some right to that land even if there's not a road there? I don't know, it's bizarre. All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Koski.
You're laughing. As you know, I worked for a title company. I was preparing closing documents, broker closing documents, and I had a survey there and my legal description, and something said, not right. I read it, and lo and behold, when the county purchased some rights away in regard to widening a street, they wrote the wrong legal description and took half his house. So needless to say, we didn't close on the mortgage. They had to go back to the county, the legal department, and correct that legal description. So be careful.
Yeah, well, I guess. I wonder if these people who bought this house know that they could have traffic driving through the patio. Okay. We are going to adjourn into closed session. We may be returning.
What about new business for the direction?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Radke. So briefly, on the issue of a Mound Road. So I'd like to try to summarize, and then if Mr. Yanez, Mrs. Koski, or Mr. Radke disagree, I mean, from my perspective, I'd like to see you guys go back. They want to start work in August. Okay, I understand that. What can we do in the meantime to work on getting as much of that sidewalk gap fixed? Mrs. Zarko had a great idea. I know we already had internally been talking about using some of that money to do sidewalk gap closing. Can we do that? Can we work with the county? Can we come up with a plan? How disruptive will it be to the overall plan and engineering they're doing? You guys have 2 weeks to figure that out. Is there anything more you want to add, Mr. Radke?
I think that we're summarized it pretty well.
Mr. Yanez?
That's it.
Mrs. Koski? Council, anyone else? I mean, it is the direction of the city. Okay. Do you have clear direction?
Very
Thank
good.
you. Very good. We will adjourn into closed session. We may be returning. Can we please have a roll call vote?
We need a
And
motion.
we need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Mrs. Riska, a roll call vote.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Rasky,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez.
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. We will adjourn into closed session, and we may be returning. call this meeting back to order, and I'll give the floor to Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski.
Okay, Mayor Taylor, resolve to authorize the city attorney to pursue all available remedies to abate the nuisance conditions and code violations existing at 4099 Nathan West.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
No, sir.
With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.